Welcome to the Black Lodge Games podcast. This is our triumphant return. Today we are talking about Adventurer Conqueror King, probably the most complete version of Dungeons & Dragons ever produced by anybody. It's a big game. We've both been playing it for a very long time. I've been running it for almost 3 years, I think, at this point. You've been running for a long-ass time as well.
I've been running a game for 9-10 months, something like that. You've run 2 games, 2 campaigns. One, how long was the first one? Was it 2 years?
Like 2 years. Yeah. And there were, to be fair, there were spots where it,
holidays,
stopped. Holidays, there's people traveling, whatever. But we were fairly consistent for about 2 years.
And I was a player in both of those campaigns. Right. You didn't play in my game, but all this is to say I guess you haven't had a tremendous amount of experience playing ACKS.
No.
But
I don't think I've had any.
Yeah, you're right.
I've only run the game. Yeah.
Nevertheless, though, that's more than enough time has been spent by both of us.
Yeah.
Certainly enough for us to have some strong opinions, which I don't think either of us are really going to deviate from. I think I'm pretty confident that my broad thoughts and takeaways are not going to shift all that much.
Yeah, I agree. And similarly for me, and this is, we tend to have very similar taste in games, and we often agree with each other a lot on things. Is one of the reasons we started the channel.
Of course.
This game is extremely divisive for both of us. I think we still have a lot of the similar feelings about aspects of the game, but
yes,
this is a game that I really, really love. I find it incredibly frustrating sometimes, but you don't have the same thought.
No,
to say
no.
Yeah.
And maybe before we get into sort of
Yeah.
my ultimate critique, because I have a much more negative opinion than you do, I think. But rather than this whole conversation sort of being augured down on that critique, we'll get into it. We do agree this is a huge, huge achievement, and there's tremendous value for, I think, anybody who is serious about the hobby should be looking into ACKS 2
Absolutely.
in one way, shape, or form, and definitely if you're a GM or have aspirations to be so.
Right.
So maybe that's where we should start. I think ACKS, ACKS is a huge, I don't want to say toolbox. I think that word is so overused. It's not inaccurate, but it's the most competent, the most thorough, and the most successful and usable game resource I think that's ever been made for logically and consistently putting a world together.
Oh, yeah.
For me, that is far and away the most lasting value.
Yeah. I will say the Judge's Journal, and I've said this before, that this book right here is it is probably the best game mastery book that's been written for sure in my lifetime. It is phenomenal. And obviously a lot of it is specific to ACKS, but there's a tremendous amount of stuff in there that is applicable to any fantasy game that you're going to run.
Right. Right.
And particularly into like the setting construction materials that they exist also in the Arbiter of Worlds book to an extent, but they're so much more fleshed out and complete here.
And not to take away any sales from McCrease, but I don't think there's any value at this point in purchasing Arbiter of Worlds, and we both did, and we both read it. Pick up the Judge's Journal.
Yeah. I mean, you should pick up the Judge's Journal, but if you don't want to play D&D, because this game is very much firmly in the D&D tradition. It is D&D.
Of course.
If you're not going to play D&D, Arbiter of Worlds may be the better option. I don't know.
I mean, unless you're really strapped for cash, if you have no intention of playing ACKS or playing D&D,
then get Arbiter of Worlds. No.
Yeah. I would tell people to just buy the Judge's Journal. Like,
Yeah.
I think the Judge's Journal is worthwhile, even if you never play or run
ACKS. Yeah.
a session of ACKS.
Yeah. No, I can.
And every single time, if you're making a game purchase, but you're so destitute that
I know.
it's like you got bigger problems.
That's true.
Pick up the Judge's Journal at the very least.
Yeah, get the Judge's Journal. This game, it is very opinionated. I am very opinionated. And the thing that initially attracted me to this is kind of interesting because Macrease was just on Bacon's channel with Crispy.
You had watched it
Yeah.
when it came out. I actually, before we even decided to do this today, I watched it this morning. So I have a lot of thoughts fresh in my mind.
Right.
A very good conversation.
It was an excellent conversation, and it was interesting to me because Macrease said that the first edition of ACKS just got this reputation of, well, it's just D&D with economics, and for me, that was the thing that got me interested in this game.
And I think a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, potentially, but for me in particular, I mean, it's like I've got a fucking Ludwig von Mises tattoo. The economics for a great part of my life was an obsession. And it is one of those things where it drove me insane. Once you understand some economics, fiction sometimes can get really irritating because people don't know anything about economics and they start writing things that make literally no sense. It's like you kind of can't unsee this stuff.
Right.
And that was something that drove me insane about D&D and fantasy games and role-playing games in particular, like just in general. And it leads to all sorts of things that are so irritating from the perspective of someone who wants a world that feels real. And that was something where it was like, no, holy shit, there's someone who actually applied this into the game and in a coherent way. Like that was mind-blowing to me that someone had done that in the first place. And so like, it's kind of funny to me that like it's just D&D with economics. I'm like, first of all, that's the most, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. That is what brought me into it. And it's persistently one of the things that I find is like one of the strongest points of this game. And it's hard for me to think of living without it in other role-playing games now. And it's true, if you're playing something like Mithras, it's a very different thematic focus and everything like that. It's not going to be as important, but it's something that really the economic constraints that are put in this game force you to go and be on adventures and do things. Like in the most recent game that we ran, like one of you guys wanted to get plate armor and a helmet.
Yeah.
They weren't able to do that at Turos Tem.
Right.
That just wasn't an option. So you had to get on the road and go to the bigger city, go to Sidanos, start poking around. It kicked up a couple of different new plot hooks and things generated out of that, just so you could get the shit that you wanted to come back and continue delving the dungeon. So like that part of it is, to me, just the level to which economics is integrated into the game. There's nothing that comes remotely close to this game in that respect, and there's nothing that's even attempted to do that, basically, at least from my experience with other games. And so it's like this.
I think that's unambiguously true.
Yeah, like if you want, and to me, that is something that makes the world feel much more real. And that was something Macrease was talking about in that video with them, was that it's like I don't remember what he had, a noetic appreciation.
Yeah, the noetic appreciation for verisimilitude.
For verisimilitude is the idea that it's like you don't have to suspend your disbelief. It's like the things that you know can actually be leveraged in this game. So if you know certain things about how the world operates, that actually deepens the level to which like you can use the game and play the game and appreciate the game. And that aspect of the game absolutely is 100%. Like for me, I love it. Like I absolutely love it.
Yeah. That and also the closer or the more accurate the game mechanics are to what the game mechanics are sort of describing or are an abstract representation of, Macrease and the game take that position as more or less their first principle. And that's it's very successful in doing that. And it does what it says it is trying to do very well. And what it's trying to do is in the title, which I like. It is very clear exactly what kind of an experience you are going to get. You're going to be within a late antiquity milieu, experiencing the actions and the drama and the fighting of an adventurer becoming a conqueror who goes on to become a king, a ruler, a Caesar, what have you. It does that very, very, very well. I don't think it does as much outside of that premise, as well as other people might think. And that's not even necessarily a bad thing. Everything should have, every game, every work should have a strong sense of identity. And again, ACKS does have this. But with it being, what do you want to say? A redeemed version of D&D. A certainly more proficiently and densely explained and supported iteration of sort of the D&D fantasy milieu. That kind of thing, that milieu it's a broader circle, right? It's a broader cloud of things you could get invested in, which don't necessarily work that well, I think, in ACKS. ACKS has magic and fantasy races, elves, dwarves, what have you, orcs, beastmen. So I think there can be some confusion. Some of the things that you might want to do, or I don't even want to say tangents, because that has a negative connotation that I'm not trying to convey. I don't know. Perhaps the more simple way to express what I'm trying to express is there's not much space within ACKS outside of those three things: adventurer, conqueror, king. A lot of things you can get up to doing, but if you're not on that trajectory, if you don't take that as sort of the given premise, if you are not playing a character who ultimately has ambitions which are in alignment with that arc, the system, I feel, will fight you on this. So, what brings this to my mind, Trevor Duvall of Me, Myself, and Die, he last week, I think, had an AMA on his channel, and he was discussing a portion of his experience in an ACKS game he's playing in, where he was recounting he's playing some kind of a divine character who is doing the dungeon delver thing, and of course, as all characters are, interfacing with the gold for XP system. But it's not about that for him. It's not about the acquisition of power per se, political, militaristic, or otherwise. It's about these more liturgical concerns and these more inner character roleplay concerns, which are not only unrepresented mechanically. Of course, there's the inner life of a character can't ever fully be represented mechanically, and I wouldn't even advocate for you to try. But I could tell he was experiencing some kind of frustration, or at least an observation of kind of a disconnect there. The game is sort of pushing him to sort of be a certain type of person with a certain series of goals, or at least a certain hierarchy of values that was not the case for him. And I have felt this way myself as well. The first character I had played in your first game was a warlock, male human warlock. Best race, gender, class combination ever. Love that character.
Yeah. He was good.
But fairly early on, we went through
the Sinister Stone.
The Sinister Stone.
Yeah.
And there are certain walls and limitations and ways in which the system was channeling me, which I did not want to abide by.
Right.
And I think those concerns were legitimate from an in-character perspective in my favor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking in particular about wanting to sort of repurpose
the Sinister Stone of Saqqara. Yeah.
Yeah, and its associated environs
Right.
in ways in which I mechanically couldn't or shouldn't do, well, really couldn't do until more levels had been accrued.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things here.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what you're talking about with essentially things you wanted to be able to do being locked behind levels.
Yeah.
Like you wanted to be able to engage in magical research, essentially. Yeah. First of all, I don't think you mean magical research as ACKS defines it. Correct?
Well, how do you mean?
Well, I don't think that Leonicus wanted to create potions or...
No. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to repurpose the fragment the Sinister Stone.
Yeah.
Which is itself a fragment of something
for
larger.
The record,
I understand that is a particular item,
right.
which
I want to give a little context to people who are listening to this.
Yeah.
I'm going to spoil the Sinister Stone of Saqqara right now. So if you're going to play the AX1 module, which you should, then spoiler warning. Anyway, the stone is this very evil fucking artifact that's incredibly powerful, that has Cronenberg radiation.
Yes.
It turns everything into mutants, and it expands this zone of control. It can be used for all sorts of transformation rituals and like really super high level like necromantic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's forged from a piece of the Tablet of Destiny, which is this kind of
large lore item.
Yeah, lore item. Now, most characters, if you are lawful, even neutral, you're probably going to try to destroy this.
Yep.
Our players, of course, said, fuck no, we're not destroying that. We want to use it. And so they kept it.
Well, I had made the case.
Yeah.
That, and it was true, I wanted to try and repurpose in some way this item. And I have no problem with the specifics of doing that not being accounted for mechanically, because this is a very unique kind of item,
right.
And this is going to be outside of the bounds of typical play.
Yeah.
But I couldn't mechanically, according to the rules, even begin to really research and play around in character, even more than willing to have mishaps happen or go down wild goose chases to find books or leads, materials, what have you. The game very clearly has these sort of locked doors, these gates that open and unlock at certain points. I think it's like 5, 7, 9.
Minor magical research is at 5th level.
Yeah. So there's no mechanical way for me to even start to pursue these ends that I have. Now, obviously, we could, and to a certain extent we did, make it up in the positive connotation, not hand wave, but facilitate that role play. But for a game which purports to be and is so dense and comprehensive, the way in which certain aspects, capacities are organized or presented was a frustration
for
me, because I did want to roleplay my character in a way which was sincere and a good faith in a good faith manner with respect to the rules and the system, because this was our first time either of us playing it.
Yeah.
So there were problems there. Now, and I'm sure Macrease would agree with this, no system can be comprehend and have a ruling for every possible permutation of thing in a world. But maybe we can talk about a certain player in our group. Has been in has been in 2 of the 3
games you've been part of. Yeah.
One you have run.
And one
I have run.
Yeah.
ACKS is written in a very legalistic numbers. It's a materia-driven game. I think it is the most left-brained game ever produced. And there is value to the left part of your brain. It helps you figure things out, especially if they're physical objects that you interact with in the world. But there is very little right brain animus, that is inhabiting the words of the ACKS system. And I think this is my biggest criticism of ACKS and why I'm continually frustrated with it. It is a rules system which is ultimately materialistic. Its sort of first principle is the first principle which sort of justifies its existence. It justifies the correctness or the primacy of its rules being its accuracy towards real-world effects and phenomena, whether that's economics, character abilities, things that a person could do in the world, macro scale effects of political rulership, all of these different things which ACKS wants you to interface with eventually. But there's very little thematic spirit to it. There's very little non-physical. It's ACKS is an eminently descriptive game. It is not a particularly creative one, I would say.
I will disagree with this entirely.
Okay.
I will not disagree with it as things are presented in the revised rulebook. That is, I think, correct, because that is a rule book. This is really, it has a little bit on the setting. There's obviously implied setting. We know what that means. But I felt a bit the same way when we first got the PDFs way back when, because we've been playing this game long before the physical books came out, before the laid out PDFs came out. We were using,
for those who recall, that was a long time.
It was a long time. We were using the Word document, basically.
Yes.
And I felt that way very much about the core rule system. I did not feel that way when I started reading the monster manual. Because that gave so much flavor and cool shit to the world. And I started to actually be able to visualize the apple at that point. But beyond that, I cannot separate my experience of ACKS from the AX series of modules that we've been using for the most part. You've been running a game, I think, in Dragonlance, right?
Correct.
I've been running my game in the Orn Empire. Those modules have so much flavor and like so many cool characters, and like I know that those are separate from these books. I get what you're saying, but I cannot separate the kind of insanely rich world that has been created on that front from this game.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And the thing about it's like mechanics obviously do imply setting. That's I would say Mithras does an excellent job of that. That is not a particularly flavorful book. That is literally just rules. But it does imply this kind of mythic setting, Bronze Age setting.
Yes.
However, it's that it is not that does not have Mike Pondsmith's cyberpunk writing style
No.
either. I think a lot of people, frankly, will find it very dry.
Yeah.
I think that is probably similar. What's going on with ACKS is just that ACKS's scale is so much bigger.
Yes.
That it's like, what is the tolerance here for how much you're willing to take on like reading and understanding the system before you're like, where the fuck is the actual juice?
Yeah. So that like, this is a separate thing, which I will get into.
But I don't think it's a separate thing, and because like everything in ACKS, this is a game where everything is integrated with everything. One of the interesting things about this game is that everything is tied to everything. Like the systems are...
It is very consistent.
Entirely integrated with each other. It's not like people think, oh, it's gold for XP. Like, yeah, it's gold for XP, but that's tied into literally every part of the game, every aspect of the game.
And there's a reason for everything. There's a reason for the gold for XP. There is a reason for these assumptions, for these mechanics, which is really well thought out and is consistent and does work together. This isn't like AD&D 2nd edition with various sort of bolted on subsystems.
Yeah, but
which is great.
Right. But this is like to get the total picture of a game like Mithras is a far less significant undertaking than getting the full picture from ACKS. And the full picture of what the game encompasses and how everything works.
Yes, that is true.
It's a very demanding game. This is not a game for casuals, like at all. And I'm not calling you a casual,
of course. But and I think we would, any game which is explicitly trying to target a casual audience, it's just not worth thinking about, because
I agree.
if you're yeah, of course, and because if you're trying to be casual, you're trying to be as close to nothing as you can get away with.
Right.
While but
right.
Tangent.
But yeah, so it's like cracking open Mithras, which is not a simplistic casual game. There's another game that's not for casuals. Like I said, that's a significantly lower barrier to actually getting in and playing the game and getting the creative juices sparked and being able to more or less play the game rules as written as far as possible.
And part of this is because the scale
and scope is so much smaller.
Right.
And so when we're dealing with a game like this, where the scope is like continent scale warfare by the end, every step along the way to that, even in the early stages, there's just so much more you need to be aware of and to know. And it's you can't avoid it with this game is the thing.
Right. Again, I would argue you have to do what is in the title.
Yes,
that has to be what the game.
If you
that's not even a bad thing.
Yeah,
but,
it's not a bad thing at all.
Don't sort of get it twisted. This is not AD&D where you could do a Spelljammer thing and you could do a Dark Sun thing with very different types of characters than who are going to exist in something like Dragonlance or even something a world like Forgotten Realms, and certainly different than a character who's running around Sigil and the Outer Planes. You're an adventurer, a conqueror, and a king. If you don't want to do that thing, you're not going to have a good time.
Yes, correct. You have to want to do those three things to play this game.
And any other character sort of goals or concerns have to be sort of subjected to that ultimate thing.
No, this is where I was by the point that I didn't quite get to when you were talking about what Trevor had said, where I think that there is a sense in which you have to want to, you can pursue those goals, but you are doing so in a world that has like these actual economic resource constraints. This game, logistics is a part of this game's DNA. Like that goes without saying. And this is something that the gold for XP thing gets a lot of criticism, and I've made this criticism, is that it's like, what if your goals are not money related?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to doing things like I want to, destroy the forces of chaos or whatever, money is a requirement to be able to do that. And a
Yep.
lot of money is going to be a requirement to do that.
Of course.
Like that it is, you kind of have to, and this is exactly how the real world works.
Mm-hmm.
You have to acquire capital in order to make these big impacts on the world, especially if it involves anything having to do with like a military or things like that. So it's like, I don't think that, while I understand what you're saying, and I do agree that there are like the level locking constraints and everything like that, that is just a part of level-based games. That is just a part of Dungeons. Any game, any version of Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to have some variant on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I still see this as like that, the noetic appreciation for me. It's like, oh, like this is taking into account the fact that everything's going to take resources. And so acquiring resources becomes a part of the character's goals. It has to be, in order to achieve the other goals. It is in service of achieving those goals. And I think that that is directly the intention in the game.
Yeah. I would say, to me, it's very difficult for me not to see the overall constraints of this particular arc that, should I live long enough, I must, to one degree or another, take part in. I may even want to do that, but again, just like being aware of zone walls, to use a video game expression, the very fact that I'm quite cognizant of this very particular arc, in the grand scheme of things, makes it difficult for me to get deeply into character. Now, that in and of itself would not be as much of a concern were it not for the fact that I also feel that this broad arc that I'm sort of compelled to engage with, this is not animated by a kind of thematic spirit. It is animated by this sort of numbers-based, deterministic justification, which is not inaccurate. The economics, the way economics works or is represented mechanically in the game, these are accurate representations of macro level effects, and they may even be accurate depictions of certain aspects of human behavior or human desire. This is something else that Macrease mentions in the conversation with Bacon and with Crispy. Basically, that wants scale with means, right? That's true. The more you have, the more you want. And so this is why gold and experience are distributed the way that they are for purposes of domain rulership, right? You can get a lot of experience up to a certain point, and then you have to go out and conquer more.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. But merely describing those effects and instantiating them into a roleplay mechanic, this is not justification enough for me for it to either fuel my imagination or stop it from prohibiting my imagination. There is such a density. These mechanical systems are quite dense.
Yeah.
And because they are quite dense, I feel the game presents it as it is therefore, because it is dense or complex or whatever descriptor you want to use, it is accurate, faithful, and useful to include in this rule system, which is there to support an imagined world of late antiquity. I don't think that is true. Merely having mechanical representations for these various effects at scale, that is not compelling to me. As such, it does not convey a sort of spirit of imagination and an imaginative or an artistic vision that I can be, in a right brain sense, inspired by, swept up in, that fuels my inspiration to create a character and to become immersed in that character and to get lost in this world and enjoy my time, going through that arc. This isn't obviously to say that you can't role play in ACKS. We've said before, and we're correct, you can role play in anything. You can role play in Fate, you can role play in 3.5, you can role play in ACKS, you can role play in Powered by the Apocalypse. You can role play in anything. It's just a question of,
like you've said, we role play in nuclear war.
We role played quite well,
yeah,
in nuclear war and quite deeply. But this is the thing. It's the more we have played with our dear friend Evan.
Yeah.
Evan is a very right-brained guy. That's just who he is.
I think you're getting your directions mixed up. Are you saying?
Sorry, left brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, left brain guy. Definitely not right brain. The rules are, again, the only word the best word I can use is sort of materialistic. The complexity and the granularity with which they represent effects in an imagined world is the justification for their existence.
I so disagree with this. It's not merely describing effects of things. It's like,
I think it is.
It's not. It's like it sounds like what you're describing is like we've come up with the trajectory of the billiards balls as you whack the thing. What it's doing is putting constraints on your choices in the game and having actual like trade-offs in everything that you have to do. Whereas if you wanted to do the sort of thing like Adventurer Conqueror King, which is something I've always wanted to do in a fantasy game. And there's all of these other systems where if you wanted to do something like this, there are essentially no trade-offs. There's no trade-offs that you would have to make that would not have to be just made up by the GM.
And it's because there are no rules whatsoever.
There's no mechanics for any of that stuff. And
I agree. I'm not anti having mechanics for these things.
I know that. Now, well, what I will say that I think I sort of agree with you in spirit on this is that a lot of times the game is going to demand that you interact with these things. And the standard line is that, if you don't have a need to use a subsystem in ACKS or some other system, don't use it until it comes up. It's going to come up sooner than you think.
And not to go down this tangent, but like there are choices that you can make right from the get-go, which have
long
impacts
which on the game
would have no way of knowing.
Right.
And do feel very arbitrary, even though they're not. Right. They feel very arbitrary. So
right. And when you start interacting with these systems, it's going to take you out of the flow state that we like. And that is for people like us, that's a huge problem.
Yeah, and again, if it had to be said, I don't know how long we've been talking about this already. I'm coming at this from the point of view of character immersion being the ultimate goal.
Sure. So I agree. So here's the thing. I agree in spirit with what you're saying here, in that the constant interaction with these they're in isolation. If you understand how the rule works, they're usually pretty simple. It's like a 2d6 roll on something plus some modifiers. But holy shit, tracking down the modifiers, understanding everything leading into these things, it's a lot. And it takes
time.
And it takes mental effort. And like I said, we've been playing this game for 3 years now.
Yes.
And it still takes a lot of time.
And I'm not a genius, but I'm also not dumb.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely understand that. And so that is incredibly frustrating about this game. However, it's like I can see what this engine is capable of. And we've had this conversation before, but it's like, if you like what I want out of this game is going to require a very particular sort of player, like a very, very particular sort of player, that is both someone who is interested very much in wargaming and interested in immersive role playing. These two things, that Venn diagram is so goddamn small. It's so small. And to have it's like the things I remember playing World of Darkness games and like really having that system mastery and like what Bacon was saying, I think automaticity, I think is the word he was using. That is exactly something that we advocate. It's like, if you know the system by the back of your hand, where things kind of, the rules, they don't take a back seat, but they go into the background because you know how to use them and you can resolve things so fast.
Yeah.
It's not possible to get that.
It's not possible.
It is simply not possible with ACKS. The game is too vast. And
this is not, memes aside, like this is not a skill issue.
No.
And also, like, this is, if I recall correctly, a particular example that Macrease gave about one of his players who was a venturer in his most recent pirate campaign. The venturer is the one who's the quartermaster and is handling all of the expenses. And Macrease was presenting the fact that, or the observation that, the player playing the venturer and the venturer himself are both really, they're crunching the numbers using, and saying that this is diegetic. That's not true. That's not, these are two separate things. And, I say it with a bit of humor because Macrease is an amazing guy. He's not a dummy by any stretch of the imagination. He's far smarter than me. And everything that he has done in ACKS and in everything that he says, we only attribute good faith. He's good faith stuff. So I'm not specifically picking on him like he's a liar. But this is just not the case in my view. There's no way to argue that going from the perspective of the character to this top-down approach. I've said to you previously that I think ACKS really does expect most of the time, if not all of the time, to have a top-down isometric sort of viewpoint to interacting with it. But you're going to have to, whether you're playing a venturer or even if you're just playing a fighter, you're going to have to get out of character to do these like very important things that cannot be avoided.
Yeah.
Even if you hire specialists and trusted NPCs.
And here's where, like, what I'm saying is, like, my dream of running this game is with this very specific set of people who are all going to know the rules enough that they can run their domain and enjoy doing so.
Yeah.
And, keep track of their armies and enjoy doing so. And that is such a small number of people that I've encountered. And also liking to do the immersive role-playing part of this. That is such a small number of people, because if you have people who don't have those qualities, then it's going to be the GM's job basically to do the accounting, which it's too much. It's too much. Or like we had in our group, you have basically Evan became the quartermaster just by virtue of the fact that he was like, I know how to use Excel. Like,
and also
this
is the only thing I want to do.
Yeah. It's not entirely true, but I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
But that also did cause a problem eventually, because he's like, look, I'm doing all the fucking accounting. Like, why am I splitting any of the gold with these people at this point? Like, they're not doing it, like, and that's a real problem. And because the thing is, like, I'm a lazy GM. Admittedly, I'm a little too lazy for how demanding it is to be a GM in this game. And it's not ultra demanding, but it's the type of thing, I don't enjoy rolling up treasure. I don't enjoy I do enjoy, in a certain respect, rolling up encounters and things like that. But even that process, that's several rolls. It's lots of page flipping and everything like that. It's not something that is well done on the fly. And
but this is the thing.
I know. I'm saying this is a problem.
Yes.
And this is why it's difficult for me with this game. It's like I can, oh my God, I can see the experience of what this can do if you have this perfect party of people that don't exist, essentially. That maybe there is one such party of people on planet Earth.
4 role players out there, as,
right?
Shauner has.
There's only a dozen role players on planet Earth to begin with. Then
Which is probably true.
And then the number of them that
it's closer to true than not true.
Yeah. And so it's like, oh my God, I can see what this is capable of, and I get glimpses of it. And to be fair as well, the game is fun. It's not like
sure.
Like we're talking about these aspects that are incredibly frustrating about it. But we've also had an enormous amount of fun.
But
it's
because we both see how ACKS is the words I would use are a masterfully engineered role-playing game. It is, I think, far more a work of engineering than it is of anything else, and it all fits together. And because everything fits together and there's a logical consistency, there are glimpses at what should be possible. I am less convinced that they actually are ultimately possible than you are. I'm not 100% decided, but I come back to merely because the game accurately abstracts certain effects does not mean, even if they are logically consistent, that they are usable to the degree in which and to the ends with which I think we would want to use them. Let's say this perfect. Synthesis.
But we've talked about this before as well, where the experience that I can see and that I want from ACKS is not the same as the experience that I want and can see from Mithras. And
yes,
because I agree, this is not a game that you can fully do the immersive character thing. You just can't.
It just can't be done
because of these reasons. Because you have to interface with so many mechanics. They're too interruptive. You have to use them to be able to play those portions of the game.
It's like, even if you could just never use economics and never use but that's not playing the game. That's not playing the game.
But I mean, it's like, even if you wanted, but the thing is, those things a lot of times are cool too. It's like,
sure,
I want to do hijinks. Like, that is really fucking cool.
I want to do those things.
But the thing is, the system of hijinks is not simply an adventure generator. It can do that, but the thing is, it's like, it is meant to be abstracted. That is not meant to be something that is
played out
as an immersive, the immersive thing. And he makes the point, and when describing hijinks, if you're going to try to assassinate someone 5 levels higher than you, like, that's not a hijink. That's an adventure. You have to go play that out. That's different. But having a guild of thieves and being able to send them out, and relatively quickly, even if it takes, it's not going to take an hour, but even if it took an hour, to say, go through, okay, these are the 15 different crimes that I tried to have them commit, and actually have them, some of them get caught. This is what you get from them. All of that stuff. That to me is cool and fun, and that is a part of this game where it's like, you can do a portion of this game being the immersive roleplay thing, but for the things like fielding armies, for the things like doing hijinks or magic research, any of these things, those are abstract systems. And so I look at those and I go, that looks fucking cool and fun. And very interesting to me. But ACKS fundamentally, to me, is a different sort of game than what we are generally looking for in a role-playing game, which is that purely immersive experience that, like, it's the holodeck in my mind, it's Westworld, It's that thing where you just get lost, and you can get lost temporarily in ACKS. You can't get lost the whole time. And so it's like I've made my peace with that, and I've got this. It's like I see this other thing that I want to do with it, and there is, and I'm fine with that. But I do recognize that on the pure thing of like I want a world that has verisimilitude, so that I can get into character, so I can make a character, play my character, stay in character the whole time. That is not what this game is. And I don't even think it pretends to be that. Like it's not pretending to that throne at all. It's
sure.
It's in a way it's doing something a lot more. It's more limited on that front of the immersive roleplay thing.
Yeah.
But it is much more expansive in that you can have the war game that is also part of the role-playing game.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like, and it's not just that we're bumping up into against the war game part of this. We're bumping up into a lot of other things.
Yeah. I think we might be saying, I believe you may be saying what I was saying earlier using different words. I'm using sort of left brain and et cetera, because I'm really not trying to be unfair. And I know you don't think you don't think
No.
that. But I'm not okay with the level of, I don't even want to say abstraction, because there's what I would call, what would I call it? This is improper verbiage, but I'm going to say functional abstraction in comparison with dysfunctional or not helpful abstraction. I would love to be able to get involved and invested in the economics, the logistics, the political, minutia of governance. I can't do it with the systems which are provided in ACKS, because those systems are very granular, time-consuming abstractions in that they correctly model how this aspect of the world works. They are not abstractions with an end to being used in play, in typical, moment to moment play. You have to step out of character to a much larger degree.
Correct. And more often. Yeah.
And for a longer amount of time.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help me get to where I want to go.
Sure.
In a role-playing game.
I understand that, which I think is probably
and this is just part of the source of sort of where we diverge in our opinions.
Right. And I think that my enjoyment and the enjoyment that I seek out of this game is far more aligned with what the game is trying to do than the enjoyment that you would like to see from this game.
And it's funny because something else that Macrease brought up in his conversation on Better with Bacon's channel, and I'm not picking I'm not nitpicking. I'm trying not to nitpick all the examples. So if I recall, Macrease brings up an example of the domain management in ACKS not being arbitrary in comparison to an arbitrary example he comes up with on the spot of having 17 resource points or something like that per month. And I hear that, like, that's not, let's argue about the 17. You got to have a justification for why it's 17 and not 12 or something. But I don't think that that's arbitrary. I think that would be, it's a model. It's a much less granular model for how domain management might work, but I could utilize this. And I'm not saying it should be that simplistic, but specificity and granularity is not the opposite of arbitrariness, and specificity and granularity is not the same thing as accuracy or something which is usable.
But so I do think the domain system is usable. I do think it is fairly accurate for what it's trying to model. And I also think
I think it's very accurate for what it's trying to.
And I think it's also fairly simple. It's not as simple as resource points. The problem is that nobody wants to look at a spreadsheet except for one guy
who
really wants to look at the spreadsheet.
Yeah. I said to you somewhat facetiously that, if Scientology is the one religion to aggregate all souls to the creation of one man, Tom Cruise, possibly the second coming of L. Ron Hubbard on Earth, ACKS might be the made for one man.
For one man. For Evan.
And his name is Evan.
Yeah. And he's the best at the game.
He's the best at the game.
Like, we're not joking.
I'm not joking.
He is the best at ACKS.
And I don't know. He might be better at it than McCrease. It's possible. It's possible.
It's definitely possible.
He has no ceiling to the amount of attention he will give and has given this game.
Yeah, that's true. But back onto the domain thing. I think that people look at the domain Excel spreadsheet and they just go, no. Yeah. Even though what Chris said at the end was like, you assign a henchman to it, you basically get a check at the end of each month.
Yep.
And that can be your level of interaction with it. Now, I'm not calling him a liar either, but that's not true.
That's a cop-out.
Yes. Because if you're going to do the simulation and you're going to have, there are other steps that you need to take, like the growth and decline of your population that happens each month, which affects all of the numbers on the spreadsheet.
Yes.
Like,
you have to do it.
Everything every time, you know?
Yep.
And the thing is, I like it. And I think it's cool. I'm not doing it for the whole party. And, I'm barely going to do it for
at all.
A GM domains that I have to run. But it's this is the thing where it's like there are aspects that look like they can be simple in ACKS and they aren't. And this is something that, like, with the proficiency system, which is core to the game, and this is something we identified that we didn't like immediately when we started playing this, is that the proficiencies really matter a lot in this game. And they're not that complicated, but you don't know what they're really used for until you read a lot of the other systems in the game and you go, oh, well, that's what that's for.
You don't know what they're also used for.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of aspects of the proficiencies which really do feel arbitrary to me, especially in this very dense, well thought out remainder of the system. It is very odd. Yeah. And this is it's certainly not an insurmountable problem.
No,
it's very,
not. But it's something I don't enjoy about it. And
it's a very odd and very visible sticking point.
Yeah. And it's the type of thing.
And you have to interact with them all the time.
Right. And when you want to do things like magic research and whatnot, like, you need to be collecting monster components. You need certain proficiencies for all of that. And that's not hard to deal with because in the monster manual, it tells you characters with these proficiencies can get this out of the monster. So you're not sitting there like, you can just tell, you can say, anybody have this proficiency? Okay, you can harvest the monster for this. Fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like the amount of monster parts that you need to collect if you actually want to do magic research the right way.
You're going to fill all of your proficiencies with just these things.
But it's also like you're going to the amount of things that you need to kill. Or like hiring people to go out and kill them to get the necessary components to get the right spells and things like that there's a lot there. And and this is where it's like something that seems simple, like collect monster parts. I have woodsmanship or whatever it is that allows me to chop up. I have healing. Healing is one of them that allows you to chop up, get the hacksaw out, get the fucking
healing,
shears.
Naturalism, alchemy.
I can, it allows me to get the elf liver out of the elf. And then I put it in my jar. And then I go, okay, I should store this. And I'm going to go into, it's a monster part. I'll use this for magical research later on.
Mhm.
Magical research opens up to you. You realize that you have all these parts that are going to do nothing for you, that
Yep.
aren't the right parts.
Yep.
So then you start going, okay, maybe I'll hire someone to go out and do this for me.
Mhm.
Let me go find specialists that have the correct proficiency. Okay, well, if I go into the market, I have to do X, Y, and Z to find this specialist.
Mhm.
It takes a certain number of specialists to do this. It's going to take this much time. You start like, it's like you're pulling on this little
Yes.
thread on the sweater, and the whole, it's like, you're just like, oh shit. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
this is the thing where it's like, yeah, it's simple, but then it draws you into all these other things. And for some people, that's fucking cool, and they want that. But the promise of the game of being like, you can use, like, you don't have to use systems until you don't want to. It's like, I don't think that's true.
It's not
It's
true.
really not true. At a certain point, you start having to use these things, and until you know how to use them, you're going to be making weird mistakes. People get irritated, like players get irritated. Once I had a big enough picture of how the game runs, I started being like, oh, okay, if I went back, I would do things differently this way, you know? And like, and I get that,
Yeah.
but like, there's just so much to keep in your head. It's like the fucking spells in the Dying Earth. Like, you know, it's like I can only keep so much of ACKS in my brain at one time.
And it's never all of it.
And it's never all
close
of
to all of
it.
it.
No, it's never all of it. And I remember like there was even a time where I felt like I had like total like book control. You know, I knew where everything was in all the books. I could look things up really quickly,
Mhm.
and then didn't play for like 2 months, and then like came back to run a game,
Mhm.
and it was Gandalf in the Mines of Moria. I have no memory of this place. It was just like, where the fuck was that? Like I'm spending all this time looking through things. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's not hard to run this game. This game is runnable. I don't want to give people the wrong impression about this, because if you've played D&D, you will be able to pick this up and you'll be able to run D&D with it. If you want to run ACKS, though, that's going to take a lot more time than you're anticipating. And it is a game where the more experience you get with it, the more it's going to pay off for you. But the payoff has to be something you want. And some people simply don't want what this game has to offer.
Yeah, because what I would say,
I do want what it has to offer.
I would reword the end of what you just said there. I would say running ACKS, the more you run ACKS, it doesn't get easier. It may get more enjoyable for you.
Yeah.
If that is what you want to do, it will never really get easy
I agree.
for you.
I do agree with that. That's an accurate way of putting it. Now, the next time that I play ACKS, I will just be playing I will just be playing Conqueror King. Because this is something, D&D is not my favorite game. That genre of game, the adventurer thing, I have explored every mystery that there is that has to offer.
Mhm.
I don't care about it. What I want to do, though, is start off with mid-level Conqueror characters who already have domains, who already have troops, and run it, just jump into just the war game aspect of this. And run it as a war game with
the
some
domains
bits,
of war.
Yeah, with some bits of role play. Yes. And to do that, again, I will use the Domains at War battles rules, which are not included in this. What you have for mass combat in the revised rulebook is an abstracted system of mass combat. It works. It can be very fast, which is great. But it is not as cool at all as the miniatures battle game that really does take into account everything that your character can do. And players, and this is not unique to my table, players will bog down mass combat in this system that's in the book by doing heroic forays every single round, because they never, ever, ever want to abstract away any of the advantages that they have on the battlefield. And I get it.
Because it's not the observation that your players, I being one of them at that time, made is not inaccurate, which is every time you abstract away, the loss, what you give up is advantages on the player's side.
Correct.
nearly, if not actually, every time. And so why not just now?
Right.
I know the answer.
I know,
why not,
but it's the same
yeah.
thing. It's like if you use the abstract dungeon delving, which is not really meant to be used with the player characters so much.
Yes.
It's a much easier system if you want, like, send your henchmen off. But you do give up a lot because you give up any decision making you get in the fucking dungeon. You know, like you give up a whole lot of stuff, and you can get really horrifyingly bad results off of that. You can also get good results, but you are giving up.
Yes.
You're giving up control by abstracting these things, and you're giving up
all your magic items.
You're giving up your magic
a bunch
items.
Of cool shit.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's true. And players who are not satisfied with let's run a mass combat very quickly and like we'll smash these guys with our guys. They just don't want to do that because it's not granular. It's not in their interest to do so.
Yes.
And heroic forays become horrifying slogs that turn mass combat simply into ACKS combat.
Yeah, and the
mass part of it just comes into the regular ACKS system. Where it's like, okay, I'm going to heroic foray against a company of infantry. I'm a 9th level character.
Yes.
With lots of spells, all this shit. I have a sword that can do infinite cleaves now.
Yep.
Because that got rolled up on the treasure table one time. So I'm going to, and I'm
just
basically
going to win.
I'm invulnerable to all types of damage that these things that the infantry can do to me.
Yes.
So I'm just going to cut them all to pieces. But instead of representing that as me having a high battle rating and rolling a bunch of D20s against them, what I'm going to do is use my character to roll a D20 against every single one of the 120 soldiers in that company of infantry. And we're all going to sit here and watch this. And it takes something that if you just used the abstract battle system could take 20, 30 minutes to resolve an entire battle. It turns it into a 5-hour slog. And that is horrible. And like you said, it's not in the player's interest to do that.
And it's an amusing sort of thing where I'm thinking about dying heroically and heroic funerals being, it's like, well, if heroism is mechanically rewarded that way, I should do more heroic forays, which take longer, even though I'm actually less vulnerable. I'm actually invulnerable to to all harm if I do that, but it would be less heroic if we did the abstract thing where I could. It's a very, things become discombobulated.
True.
In these sort of situations, and no game is immune from edge cases, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Right. And now in contrast, I have access early to the Domains at War video game.
It looks fun.
It is. And it's very cool. It's a lot of fun. And the Domains at War battles rules for the first edition of ACKS are awesome, and they are super, super well explained. This is something where I think like the traits that commanders have in the revised rulebook, like leadership ability and strategic ability and all of these things, they're really kind of spread out into a couple of different sections in the book. And by the time I had gotten through the armies chapter and gotten through the maneuvers chapter and got to the battles chapter, I had forgotten what the fuck those things did. And so I was like, wait, what? And like, but Domains at War battles, it's like you have 3 attributes that really matter on the field.
Yeah.
Here they are. This is what they do, you know? And it's like, it's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. That's what I want to do. And that system does account for your character and your spells and your magic items and all of that stuff, while being really tactical and fun, and like it's just cooler.
Like, the Domains of War, does this system use the same battle rating number?
No. That
is great, because
battle rating is just for the abstract stuff.
Yeah, because this is another problem. Calculating battle rating for certain monsters, namely demons and dragons, is nightmarish.
Yeah.
And I just won't do it.
Right. There's certain
I've done it
things.
once,
Yeah,
and I will never do it again.
There's certain things. I wish that the Monsters Manual, it has, just like a lot of the other D&D games, it has systems for generating dragons, generating demons. They're very cool. You can make some very unique things. I wish it just had, here's a black dragon, here's a red dragon. Like, give me the examples. That would have been great. Because you're right, when you have to generate those things, even if it's not on the fly, if it's like in preparation, that takes time.
It's very difficult to figure out where it is because you have to go through to multiple sections in the book,
right?
Some of which are very counterintuitive, especially if you're doing this for the first time.
Right. It's something, this is a game that does not play well with a truly zero prep style.
Sure.
Like at all. I mean, like it benefits a lot from preparation. And the thing is, the preparation can be a lot of fun. Like there's a lot of cool shit. Like I remember like the couple times that I've built dungeons using the Judge's Journal, it was fucking fun. And it was very cool.
I agree. It was fun.
I love doing all that shit. But the thing is, I'm kind of lazy. And the game can't dominate my whole time, my whole week. And everything, and it doesn't, and it's not asking you to do that. But the way that I usually run role playing games is once I have enough sense of the system, we just start playing and we start going. And if there's a table I can roll on that's quick, whatever, to do something in the game, I'll do that. But we just bing, 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 bing. It's not like that next. Like rolling encounters is a multi-step process. You know, it's like you roll to see if there is an encounter, what kind of encounter it is. If it's a civilized encounter, now we have to roll on that table, find out what it is. Okay, is whatever we rolled up in the civilized encounter technically in its lair? Okay, that determines the number appearing and blah, blah, blah. And I know that's not that different than a lot of other games like this, but it is, I do not enjoy doing that on the fly. And there are some people that have put together like spreadsheets and things like that where you can just click a button and it does it for you.
I won't use that either.
You shouldn't have to.
I shouldn't have to. And I won't.
And I have used them and they are very useful. And thank you to whoever did that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like that kind of, I still, even like I said, I have this desire to do this thing where it's like, I know this game is going to be more abstract in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I still want, I got to get mine, though I want that role playing. I want those little, the golden tidbits of that role play experience.
Yeah.
And man, oh man, these systems, like rolling up scrolls off the treasure table.
I won't do it.
Anytime that a scroll comes up, I say, nope, that's invalid. They didn't find a scroll, because rolling up scrolls fucking sucks, man.
And I'm not even trying to win the argument, because we're not having an argument here. But like the example about
win the agreement.
Yeah. Scrolls, your description about how the multi-step encounter process is, the example of proficiencies, you pull the string and it's actually this, which actually has, this is my point. There is, and I don't think I'm being unfair. There's not a strong enough thematic first principle. There's not a right-brained first principle that is either sitting at the same place or sitting above the left brain first principle of granularity here, where I can from within.
There's something wrong. Do
you understand what I'm saying?
I do, but I think I'm not saying you're even, it's imprecise language. It's not granularity. It's something else.
Okay, well, we can.
But that's not the right concept. I know it, but yeah.
But this is
I'm trying to figure out
all of these examples, the scrolls, the encounters, how all of these things are nested and work. These mechanics are accurate in that they describe something, and they are very complex. I'll say complex, not complicated. Mechanical representations of these things. The resolution is very high, let's say, for representing a number of these different things within the world. And so in that sense, it's true, but for the same reason we're saying, I'm not going to roll up fucking scrolls.
Yeah.
I'm never going to calculate the battle rating of a dragon ever again for any reason.
Yeah.
I won't do. I'll make it up. And I will be right to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
But I cannot make the argument that I am either right or even have a fucking point here from the spiritual position of this game, because it's like the opposite. It's describing a similar thing. It's like what is that book, or that phrase, Leviathan always swims left. If we're talking about politics, bureaucracy always swims to the left. ACKS always swims to the more high resolution. I'm just going to say the word granular here. I can't. Our friend, and we love him. There is. I don't think Evan, with his myriad observations and profoundly infuriating insights about the mechanics, I don't think he can be said to be playing the game in bad faith, really. I say only somewhat facetiously. And this is untenable. This is not... This is just ruinous if taken to its extreme.
To its logical conclusion. Yeah.
Because even something like 3.5, or let's AD&D 2nd edition, or let's take the real counter example here, where the position is completely reversed within the Ring of Fire.
Yeah, within the Ring of Fire, which is only right brain.
There are problems, tremendous problems with this.
But it's a great game.
It's a great game, but
but it doesn't tell you what target numbers are.
and many other things. Yeah. Like if there was a kind of thematic vision that was conveyed in ACKS, and I really don't think there's a creative vision. I think there's a descriptive vision. ACKS wants to describe and give the tools to mechanically represent a fantasized version of late antiquity. Why that is, or in what the spirit in which that endeavor is being done for, is not present within the game. And I'm not saying Macrease doesn't have that.
God, I disagree.
Look at how something like divine power is explained in the game. Like this is a complete reduction of transcended to
utils of
how many
God
of God power. It's like no, I'm not.
I know you find this unacceptable.
So like. And this is, I think if there was a stronger, whatever the hell it is I'm trying to sort of explain here, you could point to that and say, okay, well, this is no longer in the service of sort of this thing up here. Let's stop getting more granular here. This is no, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's no brakes on this train. You know what I mean? To make it more and more complex.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And I'm not even totally committing to that. But
I know I understand the point that you're making.
And I don't think it's completely incorrect.
I don't think it's completely incorrect, but I do think that there is a creative animus behind this game.
What is it?
It is like a big part of it is this simulation of adventures in antiquity. And a big part of that, though, is watching someone start from humble origins and become Alexander the Great, but in a world of monsters and magic. And not having monsters and magic be arbitrary is to actually have a world in which you can do that. But to be Alexander the Great, you actually have to deal with things like the economics of things and the economics of conquest and all of that. It is
I agree, that's what it does,
but that's also, but this is, to me, it's like when I see this game, my visions are of blood and armies and clashes of titanic forces and like beings wielding big fucking magic weapons and shit at each other. Like, this is,
it may just be for me something lost in the translation, because I'm going to be somewhat facetious. We had a very amusing anecdote some months ago where the punchline of this of this conversation was what was it? It was tell me how many numbers are in the horse.
oh yeah, no. It's show me the numbers.
Show me the numbers inside the horse.
Yeah.
I don't see the numbers inside the horse. But I really
You'll have to give me the context on that, because I don't remember I was not present for that conversation. It was because it was you as a player.
Yeah.
And they were trying to maximize the purchase of some horse, because it turns out that you can get,
it was about trying to buy a horse with all 18s.
Yeah, with all 18s in its stats, and you can do this. There's like,
and how much money is that worth for for
right.
How many calories equates to how many copper pieces
then,
equates to more quality units.
Right, exactly. And so Evan was going deeper and deeper and deeper on this until finally you were like, you can't, there's no numbers inside the horse or something like that. Like, it's a horse. but I know exactly where you're going with this, because you're not wrong, is that this game encourages that sort of
what if
involution of role playing?
But what if there were numbers inside the horse?
No, but it's that the attempt to cover all bases, the attempt to cover everything, and to account for everything, that is magnetic to the power gamer personality.
Yes.
And the person who is interested in primarily manipulation of the system, because that's the most interesting thing about the game to them. And for people like that, this is the best game that's ever been made.
Yeah.
Like, by far.
And you'll all be trapped in there with them. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's done not in the spirit of serving those people. It's done in the spirit of maintaining the verisimilitude and the reality of the world. But the problem is that it doesn't matter.
But it also is
because
it is done in the service of them, because it is written with this very
this is what I'm saying. It's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yes.
Because I think what you said was like, you have constructed the throne upon which Evan sits. With this game.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. That in itself is an achievement.
Yeah.
Like, that is an achievement.
If it could be a self-contained solo experience, this would be the perfect, the perfect Matrix pod.
I will say, when I did that solo gaming thing, I had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
But again, that was, and this might actually be exactly what I'm getting at, is that the fun that I got out of that was completely different than the fun that I get out of playing Within the Ring of Fire or Mithras or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not character immersion. It's a different.
It's not character immersion, but it is this thing of like, there is this thing where the world is real, and there is like, you are really out there running into wild encounters, and there are the reality of that experience is so well supported that it's totally novel. Like, I really can't imagine doing this with basically any other system. I wouldn't be interested in doing it. But the thing is, it's like I've never solo gamed or anything. And people, like, when they ask game creators now all the time, will your game have solo rules? It's like, what the fuck first of all, what the fuck do you need solo rules for?
Yeah. What are you even talking about?
Like, do you have an imagination? Like, use your imagination. But the thing is, it's like, you really don't need them in ACKS, because it's like, okay, I've moved into this hex. I check for an encounter that is going to provide a whole lot
the tools
of shit.
Are there. Yeah.
Okay, it's there's people. It's a civilized encounter. I'm gonna start making some reaction rolls based on the characters, the disposition, like all of these little things, and this is going to tell me something about the greater state of the world. Like in that solo video, it's like he runs into this fucking company of cavalry. which is
Yes.
like, that's not something that's generally supposed to be happening in the Borderlands, given the state of the setting. Borderlands are depleted of troops. So it's like, that actually means something here. And this is where it's like, in that context of sitting there and rolling all of this stuff out, if you're a GM who likes to do preparation for sessions, this game is like, you're going to have a ton of fun doing that. And the thing is, the preparation for sessions is for sandbox emergent play. It's not
a plot.
It's not a plot. This is not prep in the sense of like you would do for a typical 5e game or something like that.
Right.
It's a lot of fun on its own.
It is.
However, when I try to do that, when I try to not prep and then do that at the table with people there, I can't do that in any remotely the same way that I can do with a simpler game. And I am then fighting this tension of my desires within myself, which is the cool experience that this system can produce, and wanting to have consistent immersive role play. And you can't have both of those at the same time. You have to alternate between them. And there are two wolves inside me. One wants the crazy simulation, one wants the holodeck. And those are two separate things in this metaphor.
But
it's an interesting game. It's definitely not for everybody. And if your goal is but if your goal is, I want immersive role play the whole time, this is not the game for it.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely not the game for it. It's the game for something else. And I think a lot of people who play D&D have had the same desire that I have, which is to do what the title of the game is. Adventurer to Conqueror to King. And to have, for anyone who wants for lack of a better word, the realism of things like economics and these other simulationist elements in there that make the world feel like a much more real place. Like, there's no substitute, I think.
There's no substitute.
This is the only one that does that.
Yeah, and I hope that in the years to come, people will look at ACKS, people will have read ACKS and taken lessons and inspiration and ideas from ACKS to carry some of what it offers and disseminates it more helpfully, I would say, in
a way that is more conducive to the other goal of the
other goal
thing.
And conceivably other goals which are of not particular concern of mine either, because there is talking about economics specifically here, even domain stuff, but economics in particular. There's this game and that's it. In terms of your standard role play game thing, there's equipment lists, and then there's ACKS.
Right. And I know that there's other games that have attempted some sort of economic simulation. None of those games have any basis in economics as like a field of thought.
Right.
They have it on a gameplay level. They have some system of economics, and that's fine. But this is like a true marriage of a game with a simulation of economic activity.
Right.
That alone is like, if this was only D&D with economics, that would still
it'd still be very interesting.
It would still blow my fucking mind.
Yeah.
And I would still love it.
Yeah. So I hope that there are the unequivocal contributions that ACKS has made are, I don't want to say iterated on, but are sort of carried forward and represented.
And stolen.
And stolen. I want a lot of
the DNA.
To be disseminated out into other games that and incorporated into styles of play which are more my interest.
Yeah.
So in that way, I think ACKS at the end of the day is not the game for me.
Yeah.
but nevertheless, it is an incalculable achievement, and I am incredibly grateful for Macree's time, energy, and effort, and it's a paragon accomplishment.
Yeah, and if right now, if the state of kind of the OSR is everything is a BX clone, I would like, or everything has BX DNA, which this has BECME DNA for sure. I mean, that like explicitly. I would hope that adventure games of the future, that people are complaining that everything is an ACKS clone or everything is, ACKS with a coat of paint on it. That'd be fucking awesome, because you will get people and they will lie about this and they will never admit it, which is hilarious. There are going to be people pilfering ideas from Adventurer Conqueror King for the next several decades in role-playing games, without a doubt.
Yes.
And shame on those people in advance for being such tremendous cowards.
For not admitting it. Not for doing it. They should be doing it.
Not for doing it. They should be doing it.
Yes.
They should be taking inspiration from this game and getting those golden tidbits out of ACKS and putting them in their games. That would be amazing. We would love to see that. But shame on them for being cowards in advance.
100%.
But yes, this is, I would say, like, we've gone pretty deep on our feelings about this game.
Yeah.
And we've gone a little bit, I won't say into the weeds, but it's probably in areas that people generally weren't thinking this was going to go. What I would say, though, is that this is a game, like I said, if you just want to run D&D, this will be the greatest version of D&D that you can run, in my opinion. If you're just doing D&D with it, it will be relatively easy. There's some big quality of life improvements in a lot of the way that the rule systems work over those other games. But if you want to play ACKS, then that is a much bigger commitment than you're probably aware of. And there's a lot of reward that can come out of that. But you just
have to want to do that.
You have to want to do that. But the thing is, like I'm saying, though, it's like I love, there's gold in every single one of these. Like, the monster manual is incredible.
Yeah.
The Judge's Journal, like I said, is the best fucking thing on game mastery that's been made in a very, very long time. And it's not just setting creation. It's like, if you want to homebrew stuff for a game and have it work, this has literally everything in it. It's how to make monsters, how to make classes, how to make races, all of these things. And it's how they built the races, classes, and monsters for the game.
Yep.
They've exposed all of the tools for you there. Yeah. So it's like you can be confident that you will make something and it's not going to be totally broken.
Yeah. You know, it's creation engine with the
you get the whole fucking engine with the game. So it's there is so much about this game that is so tremendous that we weren't kind of able to cover in that, because that's not really the point of this talk. The point of
we
this
wanted to give our
what are our points of conflict?
And agreement, to be fair, because this is, first of all, ACKS is too big to do a point by point review.
Yeah, it's not possible.
And even if we could, I don't particularly want to do it.
No.
This is more interesting. And I think this is the appropriate format in which to discuss this, because even though we have different opinions at the end of the day about it, this is a game that made us think deeply.
For years.
We have for years at this point. And we've talked for however long we've been talking about it.
Yeah. Quite a while. So I think that's all we've got to say. Macrees, if you want to come on our channel, of course, you always have an open invite.
Please do.
Happy to have you on to discuss more things ACKS. And I'm taking a break from ACKS and for a while. And like I said, the next time we'll jump in, it's Conqueror tier and beyond, and we're playing Domains of War battles.
And I will I will absolutely back After the Flesh when it comes out. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I'm already we're both getting minis together. I'm making some Domains at War armies that we'll be able to use
hopefully
against each other.
Things to be announced in the future.
Yeah. We'll do that. But in the meantime, I do have to take a break from that and play a much simpler game The next game that I'm going to run for you is Ascendant by Alexander McCrease,
which we'll also have a retrospective
on.
I feel the same way about Ascendant as I do about ACKS, but even more because it's even more explicit.
But I think it's
talking about the volume of fumes.
But to be honest, I think Ascendant's simpler than ACKS by
it's gonna be easy.
By like an order of magnitude or two.
I can tell it's very easy.
It's actually it's simpler than ACKS by 2 supermetric points.
Okay. Well, that remains to be seen. Yeah. We'll see. Well, we will talk about that when we do it.
Yeah, that's true.
But
yeah.
All right.
But we will we'll call it here. Thank you for tuning in to the Black Lodge Games podcast.
Thank you, boys.